So for those of you who are regular members and attenders and fans of Cathedral of Hope United Church of Christ, you will know that we are in the middle of a sermon series for this season of Advent called Christmas, It's Not Your Birthday. Or if you looked in the voice, you would have seen it's Christmas, It's Not Your Birthday, Blanche. Christmas is not your birthday. Now, before I get into the word, I just want to put a little caveat out there because I got a little bit of feedback this week, especially from those of you who, for December the 25th, Christmas is your birthday. First of all, my apologies. But as I was meditating upon that and trying to think of some, really good way of coming back at those folks, I was reminded that, of course, December the 25th will always be your birthday, but it's not Christmas. Christmas is the day that we celebrate the birth of Jesus Christ. And unless your name is Jesus Christ, then perhaps it's not your birthday. And if it is, I apologize. Christmas is not your birthday. I think sometimes we act as if it is our birthday. We act as if it is something or always about us, instead of taking moments through the season of Advent, and specifically on Christmas Day, to think about the one whose birthday we do celebrate. This sense of a Christ who came to us thousands of years ago, but the same Christ who was spoken about through the prophets generations before that. I sometimes think that in a world such as we are today, we live in a world that is so full of instant gratification. And yet those who were the prophets of old lived out this truth of a coming Messiah, this truth of a coming one, this truth that was spoken through the prophets, and a miracle that they never got to witness. Sometimes those of us as Christians today assume that the miracle has to happen almost instantaneously. In fact, some of us have been brought up in churches where unless there is evidence of the miracle did not happen. But we come to a fuller understanding that sometimes miracles take a little while to actually come to fruition. That miracles sometimes take generations to happen. Listen to those words of the prophet Isaiah, who spoke about something that would happen that he would never see in his lifetime. And yet the promise of that miracle was generated and given from generation to generation. There were women in the Jewish culture who prayed every day, "Let me, O God, be the birth mother of the Messiah who would come into the world." And generation after generation, as the story was passed down of a coming Messiah, one who would save the people, the one who would allow the chosen ones to find their liberation from the oppressors. That same Messiah is the same one that we call upon and whom we celebrate in this season of Advent, this season of waiting, this season of anticipating. And we might ask ourselves, why do we come to anticipate and to wait when Jesus was born 2,000 years ago? We come in this season of anticipation, this season of waiting, knowing that the Christ child can be born again in each of us. And that the truth of the gospel that was shared in Jesus' time and from generations before us is still true today. That this same Christ comes encouraging us, anticipating within us the hope of the Emmanuel, the God who is with us, the God who is through us, the God who lives out the miracle of everyday experiences through each and every one of us. Christmas is not your birthday, but Christmas is a season for us to celebrate the birth within us, that hope of a transformed world and a transformed life. It is that miracle that we come this day to expect a miracle. Expect the anticipation that somehow God will do something through us that is beyond what we conceive, beyond what we understand, beyond what we might even know to be true. That somehow the miracle will continue to happen. Christmas, in many ways, is the gift that keeps on giving. And it keeps on giving as we open ourselves to something beyond ourselves, to a higher power, to a spirit, to a God who is able to do majestically through us what no one else can do. I love that about this story of Jesus, born of Mary, the virgin, who believed that she could not give birth, and yet the miracle happened over and over. It was a miracle that was in the waiting room, in the sidelines of society, waiting to happen. Do you realize, sisters and brothers, that as we come into this worship space this day, that we are the miracle that the world is waiting for? We are the miracle that the world is anticipating. We contain within our lives and within our souls and within our bodies the miracle of a transformed world. It is that miracle. Today we come anticipating, expecting a miracle. Now, I don't know if you're anything like me, but sometimes it feels as though miracles are something that happened a long time ago. We live in a world now where we don't expect the extraordinary. So many of us have lived our lives or come expecting or living a life today where there is nothing extraordinary. It's living from paycheck to paycheck. It's living from one moment to the next. And yet the gospel of hope comes to us this day, expecting and hoping that we would want something more in our lives, something better in our lives, something more majestic in our lives. Indeed, the Holy Spirit's job within our lives is to transform us. It is to change us. It is to bring to that sense of in a twinkling of an eye, everything is different. I don't know about you, but that makes me excited. It kind of gets me up in the morning. It kind of breathes breath into my body that somehow, if I would allow myself to be open to the promise of the Holy Spirit, if I would allow myself to dream beyond who I am as an individual, that somehow a miracle will happen. Cathedral of Hope, we are a miracle of Jesus Christ. We are a miracle. As I look around our congregation this morning, I see testimonies of a miracle of life. I see people who are here this morning who believe that somehow, many, many years ago, that they wouldn't be here today. I look around in our congregation this morning, I see people who are in recovery, who believe that if they didn't get clean and sober, they wouldn't be here today. You are a miracle. Expect a miracle. You see, we think of miracles out of our perspective, but miracles are the everyday experiences of living and showing up in life. Miracles are something that we should expect every single day. Just as Mary and Joseph on that journey to Bethlehem in the story that we celebrate at Christmas anticipated that somehow God would transform their situation, so the miracle for us is that somehow God will transform us. It is the anticipation, the waiting, and knowing that somehow God will intervene, even if it's through the voice of the stranger, or if it's through a program of our Cathedral of Hope. We are a miracle. In days where we could pack up our bags and go home and believe that the world is against us, this church continues to reach out beyond itself. When I heard that every tag on the Christmas with a Cause tree, every tag for Maple Lawn School had been taken over these last 2 weeks, I went, "Yoo-hoo, that's a miracle!" I did, I literally went, "Yoo-hoo!" It's a miracle. It's a miracle from your generosity. In a time when we could just recluse and take ourselves out of the world, we continue to think about others. Isn't that a miracle? Isn't that a miracle? Now, there are red and green ones still on that tree, so don't think that we're off the hook yet. This past Wednesday, Cathedral of Hope was a miracle. We were a miracle as we gathered for our World AIDS Day service and to remember those who had gone before us and to commit ourselves again to those who are living with HIV and living with AIDS complications in their own bodies. We were a miracle. The week before, last Sunday, there was a member of our congregation who went across to the Interfaith Peace Chapel to look at the quilts that are over there. And as he was looking at the quilts, he caught his eye on one of the names that was on a quilt. And he took a picture of that name and he sent it to the sister of the brother whose name was on that quilt. She'd made that quilt about 20 years ago, and had not seen it for the last 15 years or so. She traveled to be with us last Wednesday and brought a picture of the quilt that she had made all those years ago and came and sat amongst us as Cathedral of Hope so that she could call her brother's name into this sacred space and to go and see her quilt one more time after all those years. And I'm delighted to say that she and her family are with us in worship this morning. We welcome you to worship. Never underestimate what you do, Cathedral of Hope, in bringing hope to people who felt as if there was no hope. That is the miracle. It's the miracle of transformed lives. It's the miracle of our transformed church. It's the miracle of doing everyday things that sometimes we take for granted, and yet we make a difference in people's lives. That's the miracle of transformation. The miracle that moves us beyond our own selves and causes us to think of those less fortunate, those who are in need. It is the symbol of the peacemaker that is creating peace within this world. And if peace is to be created within this world, then it has to begin by creating peace within ourselves. A peace that passes all understanding, that keeps our hearts and minds in the love and knowledge of God when all we want to do is go out and scream. It is that miracle that visits us this day if we would be willing to open ourselves. And whilst we might not see world peace in our lifetime, just as they did not see from the prophet's time the birth of Jesus into the world, that does not mean that the miracle is not beginning to happen. But it begins to happen when we consent one with the other to sign up to being peacemakers. It begins to happen when we consent with one another to agree to live in harmony and in communion with one another. It begins when we would put ourselves perhaps a little less than someone else so that they might find the miracle within themselves. It begins when we as a people of this world would break down the systems of oppression that the Jews saw through the prophet's eyes, and that we see through the eyes of Jesus this day. Misogyny and sexism, racism. I want to tell you this week as I was scanning Facebook, because that's where all the news happens these days, whether it's true or whether it's not. Remember to check it out on Snopes before you post. But so excited this week to see that the largest mall of America decided to use a black Santa in the mall this year for the very first time. That's how you begin to break down the systems of oppression. I know it sent some shockwaves across America that somehow Santa was not white. But believe me, neither was Jesus. Jesus was a Middle Eastern refugee. And we as Cathedral of Hope are a sanctuary for our refugees in this country so that they might be welcome in this space. That's the miracle of Jesus. That's the miracle that we come expecting. That's the miracle of being a vibrant, inclusive, progressive congregation of the United Church of Christ. That's what it means when we put legs on our prayers, when we accept that we are called to be the miracle of Jesus, if the birth of Christ is to mean anything today. I encourage us, sisters and brothers, Cathedral of Hope, to expect a miracle to live through us. To find ourselves in places where we might be the miracle for someone else, and to live in ways that this gospel of joy and hope and love and peace might begin today, born in us this day, so that the world one day will live in peace and harmony. So that the world one day will look back and say, you know, on December the 4th, 2016, we prophesied, just like Isaiah, that there would one day be born in us a miracle. And they'll look back and they say, and so it is. But it has to begin when we open ourselves to expect and to live as if the miracle has already happened. You see, a prophet is not someone who just tells the future. A prophet is someone who consents to live out the gospel of Jesus, the gospel of good news, as if it has already happened. And when you live like that, not only do you expect a miracle, but you are the miracle of Christmas. Show up in life, sisters and brothers, because we're a long time not alive. But live every day as if the miracle of the birth of Jesus counted on you and what you make happen in this world. Christmas, it's not your birthday. Or perhaps it is. God bless you, Cathedral of Hope.